You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the 95 Podcast. I'm Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network. And I hope you're having a great new year. I know that things are off to a great start here at 95 Network. One of the things that we've been excited about focusing on is we're doing a new Soul Care Essentials conference, and I have a lot of those coming up. And so I'm really happy about that. But as every week we continue to produce the podcast. And today I have got a guest of guests with me today. This fella I have known longer in his life than I haven't. I think it's the best way to say that. Today I have Jeff Wright with me. Jeff is serving in ministry as a church planner. We'll get into more of that later. But currently we're just kind of hanging out together. So Jeff, how you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. I guess I thought about it the other night. I think I've known you since you were 8, and now you're crawling on up to
7 or 8 years old. Yeah.
7? Was it 7?
Yeah,
okay.
7 or 8, very young.
Yeah. And how old are you today?
28.
Ooh, so yeah, I've definitely known you longer than I haven't. So, if you would, Jeff was in the church that I pastored. Most of you listening know that I was the small church pastor for 12 years, and Jeff and his family were part of the church, and we spent a lot of time together out in the woods and talking about the woods. But Jeff, if you would take a moment, just kind of share your story.
Yeah. So as Dale said, I went to church as a young kid. Grew up, pretty much in church from 8 until, the early teenage years. And so Dale a long time. So basically, as I mentioned, I was in church until early teenage years. Around that time, like a lot of teenagers do, kind of made some bad decisions and went down some wrong roads for a number of years. And basically in 2015, 16 now, I was coming up on 21 years old, kind of evaluating my life. And as I said, grew up in church and started looking around at the friends I had who were serving the Lord and who were still a part of church, and looking at my life and the road I was going down, and decided, that's not the way I wanted to go anymore. And basically told the Lord that if he could change my life, I'd give it to him. And really nothing has been the same since. About a year later, I moved to another city about 3 hours from where I grew up. I got to be a part of a local church plant there. And it's just really where I felt the Lord's call in my life. It was amazing. I got to find out that I was capable of so much more, that God had so much more in store for me. And that was amazing. So, I was at that church for about 2.5 years. Went on my first missions trip back in 2017. And immediately after getting back home, we got back, and on that trip, I really felt the Lord call me and say that I'd be serving the nations, So I knew right then that's what I was supposed to do. So came back from this missions trip 3 months later, basically sold everything I had and moved to Africa for a year. That was an amazing time. God did so much work in my heart and in my life, and just showing me that there's so much more outside of what I know and my background, and just showing me his heart for the world and his heart for different people. Through living there, I actually met the woman who's now my wife. We've been married about 3.5 years. We've got to serve in a few different nations together. 3 months after getting married, we moved to an island in the Mediterranean to plant church there. We've served in a few different places and just had a really incredible few years. That's kind of how we got up to where we are now.
All right, so here you are. You're sowing your wild oats in high school. You were involved in our church, but not a lot. No. You were also hanging out with other people.
I was drugged to church.
Yeah. You drugged to church. So you have this radical breakthrough. What led to that? Did you just bottom out? What led to that?
Man, I was just looking around at people I'd known growing up, people who were in church the church that you pastored, that we knew growing up, even my own brother, who was still following the Lord, and just seeing the way that things were coming together in his life, seeing that they would go through things and have so much joy and so much hope. And every day for me just felt so hopeless, And I knew the one thing that was different was that they had a relationship with Jesus, and that was above all else, that it gave them joy and it gave them hope. Whereas I just, for a number of years, hadn't felt any joy or any hope. And really, like, when I got to thinking about it, I was picturing like where I would be when I'm 40, 50 years old. And I just didn't want to live to see that. I was like, I don't want to ever, live that long to see that. So I told the Lord, I was like, if you can change my life, if you can change my future, then I'll give it to you right now. And it was really quickly how much just, it was amazing.
Do you know the source of your emptiness? Because you're only 20 years old, and you're already at a place where you're going, God, look at how life. Do you know what the source of that was?
Yeah, I think I was very young, but I lived a lot of life in a short amount of time, and I was in places that most 20-year-olds would never, imagine that they would be. Mm-hmm. And I know, like, looking back now, it was amazing seeing like all the choices I made, the places I was where I never thought I would be. And just seeing how Jesus was with me the whole time, like protected me, kept me safe in a lot of ways. I shouldn't be alive. I shouldn't, there's so many things that should have happened, and they didn't because the Lord was with me. And so just realizing that, like, without that relationship with him, none of these things would ever bring joy, would ever be stable. It has highs and lows. There's good days, there's bad days, but Jesus was the constant that was missing that I needed.
Yeah. Well, I know your mom is a passionate prayer warrior, and she prayed you back, if we could say that. But I also know your mom and dad split up when you were young, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, they did.
How old were you when your mom and dad split up?
13, I believe. 13, 14.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, I just remember, I've talked about, you don't know this, but I've talked about you on podcasts in the past, because you were one of those young people in our church that you had such a high passion for the outdoors and for hunting and fishing and all that kind of stuff, and still do somewhat, but probably not like you did back then. And the Lord really kind of dealt with me about using that as a way to mentor you. And so, I always would make a commitment to you. I would never promise you that we were going hunting or fishing, or I don't know if we fished together, but I would never promise you we're going to hunt unless we actually did it, because I knew how disappointed you had been in the past, because your dad would promise you a lot of times he would take you, and he didn't do that. And so that probably that unsettled you, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I remember, like I said, I had that radical encounter with the Lord. A few weeks after, I actually think I remember meeting you at a Waffle House or something, just to share with you what the Lord had done. I think it was, it's like I said, looking back at like the places I ended up, things I did, the way that the Lord was with me. There was you, and there were so many other people that the Lord like sent in my life throughout those years. And it was just like, once I had that encounter with him, I could see the way that God was using you and other people like you to just be there for me, to keep me out of, I could have been in a lot more trouble, but I had people, from a young age. I had men speaking into my life. I had people teaching me how to do things like hunt, how to fish, working and things like that, so it's just, that's all part of how I just look back and see the Lord's hand in it. You were a big part of that. And like I said, a few weeks after that, I was really excited to reach out to you and tell you, it's like, I know that you were there and you prayed for me a lot, and I was stubborn and hard-headed, but look what the Lord has done.
I would call you a pain in the rear a lot of the time.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember, I hadn't talked to you in years after we'd closed the church and y'all moved on somewhere else. And but you got in trouble one night, and I was one of the guys you called.
Yeah,
like,
I do remember that.
I said, hey, wow. And the reason I wanted to kind of highlight that is I don't want to dredge up the past, but I want pastors and mentors who are listening to understand you don't understand the impact you have sometimes, not from preaching and not from Bible studies. Not that those are wrong or bad. I'm not saying that at all, but we just lived life together. We went hunting. I was with you when you killed your first deer. I asked you not to show pictures of it because it was so little, but you went to school and did it anyway.
Yeah.
And then, you became an expert, outdoorsman. And so I just want people to understand sometimes one of the misunderstood concepts that we have in the church today is discipleship. And I think, in my era growing up, discipleship meant you sat down and you read accordingly that in Sunday school. And that's a part of it, but discipleship is relationship. And, and here you are, you're almost knocking on 30's door, and I've known you and others have known you. And it's really exciting to see what the Lord is doing in your life. And I wanted to kind of highlight the fact that this is not an emotional turnaround where, that's going to kind of fizzle out in a few days. You've been living the life you're living now for a while.
Yeah. Almost 8 years. Yeah. And it's so good to see, again, like I said, just the way that like the Lord's hand was with all of that. It was so good. And it really is awesome. And it's great. You can even see like the ministry that my wife and I are doing today. You can see how that was shaped by those experiences, like what you just said, like discipleship was doing things together, doing life with people, doing things that, fit into the culture, where we grew up, hunting's part of the culture.
Yep.
Wasn't that long ago and schools were closed on opening day of deer season, and you were able to mentor me and to disciple me and teach me so much about the Lord through just spending time with me in the deer stand, being there and doing life. And so a lot of that, you can see how that shaped our ministry and what we get to do today. We understand that really is the key to reaching people and to see lifelong change. And like you said, it's not just an emotional high or moment, it's consistent and it's lifelong change and growth,
Well, one of the things that I think we deal with today, and I use this terminology, I think today we all live in the residue or the leftovers of the attractional and the seeker movements. And there were some good things that came out of those, but some bad things that came out of those were we didn't do discipleship. And and so we talk about discipleship, or we have a class, or, I was recently at a service where someone had made a commitment to the Lord in the service. And I was just so amazed at how nonchalant the church was about the fact that person just received Jesus. And now if you'll do this and plug into here and join and get and text this and scan this, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that person just gave their life to Jesus. And it's become such a systematic kind of thing that we do, and how we handle it. It's not really good. And so one of the things that I'm hoping churches understand is that discipleship is mentoring. It's life. It's living life together. If I had sat down with you every week and tried to sit down and read the Bible to you, we wouldn't be talking today.
Highly doubt it.
You didn't care about that, but I think one of the things that we got to see was I got to be the Bible for you, Yeah. And we spent a lot of time sitting in buddy stands together on cold days. And I remember the time that my truck engine blew. we were heading hunting and the engine on my truck blew, and you just we were in the parking lot of the church. And I remember what I did was, because I promised you I'd take you hunting, and my truck had 320,000 miles on it. So it was due. I took my wife's car and we still went hunting.
Yeah,
I didn't want you to be disappointed, And so,
we did.
But I was thinking about that. You dove out of the truck in the parking lot. It was like, oh no, she's going to blow.
Yeah.
That's real life, man.
That's another thing as well. Like what you said about, you got to be the Bible for me. And I saw, like, one of the things I saw and noticed as a child was, you and Gina's marriage and the way that you were in that marriage. And it taught me a lot, and like you said, like all of that space, it's right out of the Bible. It's textbook Bible, but you were able to show me that by living it rather than sitting down and trying to teach me. And like I said, like there's great wisdom in being taught and studying and learning the Bible. But when we're reaching people who are far from God or people who are really set in their ways, it's good to just live out the gospel in front of them, and they see it and they pick up on it. You taught me so much about marriage and how to raise a family and things just by doing it and allowing me to do life with you and see you do it,
And see, that's just so good, because there was a lot of disappointment that came from your dad not being there for you. And I had 3 daughters growing up. So I mean, I made it, you don't know this, but I spent a lot of time in prayer, a lot of time focusing on, because I knew better than making a commitment to you that I didn't follow through with. And so I spent a lot of time, because I took all my daughters hunting. I took all my daughters fishing. I invested in them. And then, and then the Lord was like, I want you to invest in Jeffrey as well. And it's like, wow, man, that's just more time. But what most pastors do is they'll spend more time in their office studying for a sermon, when really the best way to sometimes to communicate with the next generation is to go out and live it with them in real life. And so,
yeah.
And then to see what you're doing today is just it's very, that's why I wanted you on the podcast, just to
Yeah.
let people know that, the investment that you make in the next generation is worth it.
Yep. It definitely is. Yeah. And also just like, like you said, like pastors that spend time learning how to do that well. And like, how do we build teams that do that well? It trickles down where everybody's pouring into someone's life. Everyone's discipling something. This church that we're a part of had this saying a while back. They called it Faith for Five. And it was like at any given time, you should have 5 people that you're investing in, you're praying for, you're asking the Lord, what do they need? You're trying to be there for them, and then, as time goes on and that people fall off that list or move on, just make sure that you always have 5 around, and just teaching everybody, like, you really do have the chance to make a difference just by being involved in someone's life. And so how do we build churches that's what we teach people that is the gospel, that is the Great Commission. It's discipling people, it's mentoring people, it's doing life with people,
That's so good. Well, so I want to kind of do a kind of systematic way to get to where you are today. So you make this commitment, you give Jesus everything, and you ended up, you said, on a mission trip to Africa. I'm assuming that was your local church went on a trip. How soon were you when you were in Africa? How soon was it before you knew, hey, this might be something I want to do, is like missions kind of things like that?
Yeah. Well, while I was there, I heard about this opportunity to go there for like a year, kind of like an internship academy, like kind of thing, where you spend a year serving and getting some teaching and stuff. And it was there in Uganda. So I heard that opportunity, and I mean, it was like within days of getting back, where I just knew, I was like, that was for me. That's what I'm supposed to go
How old
do.
were you at that point?
23.
Okay. So it's kind of a chance for a fresh start too.
Yeah. And, I had moved away a couple of years prior and was like part of a church plant in South Carolina, away from my hometown, which was a great opportunity. But, yeah. And even that, like looking at going back to Uganda for a year, it wasn't in my mind that this was going to be my life. This is what the Lord was calling me to. It was just, I knew for a year I was supposed to go and take this opportunity. So I went, and it was really amazing. Over that year, God spoke to me so much about, like you said, a new start, about who I was really intended to be, what the calling was, like what the Lord, he just taught me so much about who he was and who I was in that year. And a big part of that was, I just knew that for the next, several years of my life, that this was going to be bigger than 1 year. This was going to go on beyond that. And just really felt that call to serve the nations and to see, that there was so much more out there than what I knew growing up, that the Lord wanted to teach me and wanted to show me. So I really knew that in that year.
Were you nervous?
Well, sometimes I was, but it's really hard to explain how much God did to make all of that stuff possible, that I was so certain that his hand was in it and that he would provide everything I needed. The money that I was able to raise to cover for things, the opportunities to get there and to do it, it was so apparent that God was speaking clearly and that this is what I was to do, that I just really felt like he was going to take care of it. So yeah, I think if anything, I was nervous about, well, where will this lead? Where will I end up? How long will I be away from home? Because I just knew that like it was going to be a big part of my life, but I didn't know fully what that meant yet.
It's just such a 180 from the life you were living before. But the thing I wanted to make sure we understood was, this was not just a reaction to something. You sit down, thought about it, counted the cost, and said, I believe this is what I want to do. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, that entire year in Uganda for me, I got to ask all those questions. And I was a single man at the time, and like praying about a family one day, and God asked me all these questions of like, would you still accept this call if it meant you never were married or you never had a family? Like, would you put this call before that? And I wrestled with that for that year, and then, just came to fully surrender and say, God, if this is what you're calling me to do, no matter what it costs me, I'll do it. And, once I made that decision, it was just amazing the way he opened up doors to do that,
And now you met your wife in Uganda, correct?
Yeah. So I took a volunteer position we had a street school program that taught school for boys who were living on the streets in Kampala. And she had that position prior, and she moved to Cyprus to plant church. And I took over her job in Uganda, and we had a few like Zoom calls. But it was just about the job, about the position. There weren't any like instant sparks or anything like that. And like 2 years later, we ended up, or a year and a half or so later, it ended up that we were both back in the States at the same time. I realized that she was like half an hour away. So I invited her to come and hang out.
And then the rest is history, they say?
Yeah. We had our first date on Friday, and I bought an engagement ring on Monday. 2.5 months later, we were married.
I will say that's one thing about you. If you know what you want to do, you get it done.
I'm going to get it done.
So what's her name?
Alyssa.
Yeah. And so I'm assuming Alyssa she must be kind of wired like you then, if she got married to you that quickly.
Yeah. I mean, she had been in that role for 2 years, where I was in Uganda. She had left to go plant church in Cyprus. And then she ends up 30 minutes down the road in South Carolina. And I invited her I was running a small nonprofit in Sumter, South Carolina at the time, and I invited her to come and check it out and volunteer and show her around. And we were talking, and I just realized, I'm like, this girl has the same call that I have, and has had God asked those same questions of like, what if this call meant that you never had family? What if this call meant that you never had that sense of security, and that, what if your life changed every few years, and all those same questions that God asked me, and had gone on that same journey. And so for me, I'm like, if I'm going to get married, this is it. This is the opportunity. This is the one, right here.
This is the one. Yeah. Okay, so I want to update us where we are today, and we can't talk specifics because of where you guys are serving and stuff. So your church planting, kind of walk us through what's happening as much as you can tell us today.
Yeah. So we've been there just a little bit over a year, about 15 months, and it's been incredibly difficult at times, but it's been great all the time. I mean, it's been really good, but there's definitely been difficulties. So for us now, typically when we hear the word church planting, we think of like, there's a pastor and there's a team and they've got a building and we're starting up a church. And there's a place for that. And we spent a few years doing that and have really loved it. But so where we're at, our focus is to hopefully one day to build a house church around us. But where we are, that's not allowed. Where we are is extremely closed off to the gospel. You're not allowed to do things like that. So the culture is completely different. I mean, it's completely different than where we grew up.
Language.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's a different language. English is very rare. So back to Dale is a perfect like tie-in. As you were saying. So for us, like we look at like church building is the goal. We want to build church. We want to have a place where people come in and worship. We want to have a place where people come in and be taught and, hear the word, a place where people gather together and pray for one another, all the things that encompass the responsibilities of the church. That's the goal. But to get there right now, like Dale said, we're just doing discipleship. We're essentially we've built a network around us of people that we're discipling. And so, right now, church planting looks like meeting with this family on Monday night and going to the sea for a picnic, or, it's like going to the same barber every time you get your hair cut and spend an hour there chatting and drinking coffee and trying to speak his language, just doing life with people.
Probably wondering why you're there.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. And it's tricky to explain, it's very tricky to explain while we're there, but, God's faithful and provides ways, but, it is difficult to really take those relationships really deep and be really impactful with the language barrier and the culture barrier. So we've spent the last year really just learning the culture and learning what it is people do there, how people get along, how people have community, and then trying to just invest ourselves in that culture and in that community, and learn the language as much as possible. We haven't got as far as we'd like on that, but that's a big part of it,
Sure. How do you keep from being discouraged or feeling lonely?
We've got a great support team of people back in the States. I mean, it is tough because we are there, at the moment we're kind of on our own there. But it is really great. We've got a team of people just really around the world that are praying with us. And, like I call on them often and explain to them how we're feeling, and people help me see it for what it is and put it into perspective for us. It's amazing how, it's one of those things I really enjoy, like fixing things and building things. And I like to be able to see my work and know how it's going. And God's got me in this place where every single day I'm asking myself, am I making a difference? Is any of this working? Mm-hmm. And it is so great to have those people around you that know your heart and know your vision, and they're able to call it out, and they'll remind you of conversations that you had with them 3 months ago when you were having a really good day and you were really encouraged. And they'll remind you of that, and it just helps you to see it for what it is, and really just try to have God's heart for what we're doing, realizing that we're not there on our own accord. We're there because God's called us there, and he's got a heart for what we're doing, and just trying to every day to see his heart for the people around us and the work we're doing, and just keep trying to do that.
Well, and then to add to it, you and Alyssa go and have a baby.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got one son, and we're going to have another baby.
Another one on the way.
Yeah.
So was your son born there, or was he born in the States?
He was born in the States. Okay. Yeah. We moved there when he was 5 months old.
Okay.
Yep.
I bet your parents and all the grandparents are so excited that you've packed that child up and you're not in the States right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they're not very happy.
How have you kind of bridged that gap as far as the, it's a hard one. I mean, it's a hard deal.
Hard. Yeah, it is hard. I'm very thankful for technology where we can have Zoom and we can have FaceTime and stuff like that. But we're actually home right now on a little sabbatical for 2 months. 2 months is a long time to be away and to be off work, but just realizing it's important that we get to have our kids around family, and we get to be around friends, and we get to have that, in our life, and he gets to know his family. So we're soaking up every minute of that, and it's been really good. What is
your vision for the new year? We're recording this kind of toward the end of 2022. So as you're on, I guess you call it furlough or your break, but you'll be back in, I'm assuming, January-ish. What's your plan for next year? What are you hoping for?
Yeah. We're hoping for a few things this year. So one is we're really hoping to be able to, as I said, like learning the language and learning the culture is such a big part of trying to do life with people. If you're trying to come and get involved in their life, you have to be willing to understand them. And so, a big part of that for us is the language. So one of the things this year, we're open to hire like a language tutor and really learn some of the language. We've done a lot of like free stuff online. We've got a very basic, I can talk for close to 10 minutes or so, back and forth, but then by then I've exhausted all of my language knowledge. So we're looking this year to really spend some time learning the language, because we know, that's going to take us really far. We want to be there for a number of years. I mean, we really feel, like this place is home. We feel like this is where God wants us. And so just looking, down the road, we know this is going to be really important. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned, like we've got a network of probably 5 or 6 people and 5 or 6 families that we're meeting with, we're spending time with, we're investing in, we're praying for, and we'd like to grow that and add a few more to that. And we're really hoping to add some families with children to that as well. I think it's going to be great to raise our children around other children, and they'll pick up on this culture, really fast, because it's all they've ever known.
Sure.
So, one of the ways we're looking to do that, we want to put our son in daycare this year. And hopefully, we can connect with some more families with children to kind of build this network around us of people that we're discipling and that we're loving on and we're doing life with,
I've got 2 really important questions I want to ask you. But before we do, I want to take a short break. And then as soon as we take the break, we'll be right back. And I'm going to ask you this question.
Okay.
I'm back now with Jeffrey Wright, and my friend, my young buck that I've poured into, who now is serving in church planting in places that are not in America. And you have to listen from the podcast to understand why I'm talking like that. But so here we are. And you talked a lot about needing to learn the language. What's preventing you from doing that right now?
One of the things right now is we've tried to, to be frugal and things and find ways to cut back on the budget. So we've used a lot of free resources and online things. But one of the things we really want to do is be able to work in our budget to hire like a full-time language teacher. So my wife and I each would get like 3 hours a day, 3 to 4 days a week, which I think would just be really incredible. I think in order to take things to the next level, in order to kind of get where we want to be able to sit and, eventually we want to be able to explain the gospel and to share all these things, fully in the local language. And if that's our goal and we want to get to that level, just realizing we need to, make an investment and hire some tutors and hire some people to teach us.
Do you know what that cost?
Yeah, we've looked around and we could both get it for around $250, $300 a month, for both of us to be able to get that time.
So for $3,600 for the year, you both could have a full-time tutor, basically.
Yeah. And that would be great.
Well, I'm hoping that someone listening right now could go, man, our church can do that, or I can do that individually. And so, and I'll give you connections later at the end of the podcast of how you can connect with Jeff. But I just feel like somebody understands the need for you to, I mean, if you're going, we understand if we're going to reach young people, we have to have youth type focuses, youth ministry type things. If we're going to reach people, certain parts of the world, we got to be able to communicate and speak the language. And if you're going to build what God's called you to build. So, I'm sure someone's listening right now who could just, either your church or you individually could take care of that. And so I hope that you'll follow through in obedience and help these guys do that. The other question I want to ask you with this, Jeff, was, do the people that you're hanging with, the 5 families, couples, whatever it is, do they know why you're there?
So they don't know that that's the primary reason we're there, but they do know.
Why do they think you're there?
I mean, it's a place where a lot of people are coming right now. A lot of expats are moving to right now because of its like centralized location. It's low cost.
Are Americans moving there?
Few, not as many Americans.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, here's this country boy who loves to deer hunt from South Carolina, and he's at this place in the world. You got to stick out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unheard of, and the thing is, like, we're able to do a little bit of work at home, and so people ask. My wife, she teaches some English classes here and there and stuff online. So people ask, we're able to share. My wife works online, and we can live anywhere. We think the people in this country are amazing. We think, it's a great place to raise a family. So here we are, which, I mean, it is the truth. We're there to do life with these people. But, the thing that's great is, I mean, we are fully able to share our belief and what we are and who we are and what we believe. They recognize, I mean, Westerners generally are viewed as Christians, so it's not like they are surprised by that. But with these people that we build a relationship with each one of them, at least at one point or another, we've been able to just explain the full gospel. And what's been really great is the way that those who've worked into the conversations, we pray every time that one of them comes over, every time we go meet one of them, Lord, would you, Holy Spirit, would you just open a door for us to share? And so then, like we had a tragic loss back in March, Alyssa and I, we lost the baby.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, it happens, and it's, it's really unfortunate. But one of those things that was really cool is, we had these people around us and we were able to share with them, the sad news, but they would come and say, but you seem okay. You still have joy. Your family's still happy. Like, how is that? And we're like, well, you know what? Like, our faith is in Jesus. And let me just tell you about him. Let me just tell you why we're able to have this faith. And then we had one person that we were praying for. It was a barista at a local coffee shop that we had seen, we'd gone in a few times, and we just really felt like we should be praying for her. And we started praying for her, and Alyssa gave her number, and she never reached out. We never heard from her. And we would just go there and just share our life, and share about, what's going on in our life. And they would see us go through things and have this peace that was just so unusual. And they would see, the big thing in this part of the world, particularly, is the way that men treat women. They would see how I treat my wife. They would see that I help raise our kids, and they're just blown away by it. It's not normal. It's countercultural. And they would ask questions, and we get to say, like, well, this is, we believe the Bible, and this is what the Bible says about this in the home, and get to share Jesus with them. And as I was saying about that, the woman that we were praying for, one day out of the blue, our phone rings, and her mom's in the hospital. And out of all the people, she calls Alyssa and asks us to come to the hospital, and we get to pray with her mom. It's just amazing that, like, the way that we get to do that, and God opens those doors. So, people know, they fully know, like, what's different about us. They know what we believe. They know why we're different. But they don't know that that's the primary reason we're living there. Yeah.
Have you had any, what we would call in these states, converts yet?
Yes. So
we
cool. have had one. Yeah. And that was a really amazing thing. I mean, it was in the first 3 weeks that we were there, and we were fully prepared that, like, we know the culture where we're going into. We know it's going to take time. It's going to be slow. And within 3 weeks, we were at a dinner party, and we had some friends around, and one fella picked up the Bible, and he explained to me, he said, hey, about 3 months ago, I started having some questions, and I went online and I ordered a Bible in my local language, and I've got no idea where to start in this thing. And so we were able to start him off, in Matthew, and have him reading through the gospel and meet with him a few times. And then he calls us up one day, and he's like, hey, I'm ready to pray and receive Christ. So some friends of ours were able to go, and they prayed with him. Unfortunately, very shortly after, his job sent him overseas for work. So we haven't been face to face with him in a number of months. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those things where God didn't need us to sow the seed. We weren't even in the country yet, and that seed was sown. And he used us to bring some water and some nutrients to it. And just because we haven't been able to like disciple him afterwards, God can use someone else as well. The same way we were just there at the right time and the Holy Spirit opened that door. And it was a great opportunity.
I know years ago there was this concept I've tried to research it, and I don't know if it's a book or if it's just something someone was teaching, but they said that for everyone who comes to Christ, there's 7 encounters. There's 7 different moments where it leads them to get to the place where they finally say yes. And you're doing a lot of 1s and 2s where you are currently. But that one you had an opportunity to be at number 7, so that's pretty cool in itself. Yeah. What does our audience need to know about what you need or what you're doing or your vision for where you're going moving forward? What can we pray with you about?
Yeah, I think a big thing is praying for us. We've got about 10 or 11 months left on our visas. It's getting increasingly difficult to get visas, especially jumping through all the practical hoops that we've mentioned. So that's a big one that we're looking into next year, is praying that we're able to get those visas renewed and stay there longer. Because, we really do have, vision to be there for a few years. And we believe that that's what's going to make a difference. And that's where we're going to see the impact, is by spending time there. So, another thing with that is like, as we want to learn languages and we want to put our kids in daycare, and we want to do as much as we can to get involved in day-to-day life of normal people the way that they do, and our family's growing this year. So our needs are going to grow. Our budget to do those things are going to grow. So one of the things is we're always looking to add like monthly supporters, because we can't work locally. And I have, no skills that really translate to a remote position. We rely on some really incredible donors to support our vision. And this past year has been amazing. Like every need that we have and more have been met. But as we have bigger vision for this year to get more involved and more connected in the community, as we have vision to raise our kids there and to have children born there and all these things, our needs are going to grow this year. So we're really looking to bring on some more people who believe in our vision and can help us take care of these things to see it out, see it through.
I want everyone knowing that's listening to know that our family supports you guys. We give you guys $100 a month. This is above our tithe that we give, but because I believe in you and what you're doing. So I wanted folks to know I'm not just having you on and letting you tell people, hey, we've got a need, and that we don't personally are involved in it ourselves. And we're going to continue doing that because first of all, I love you and I appreciate you. And you're a great example of what the grace of God can do. But I want you to be successful in what you're doing, because at the end of the day, this whole life, everything about this life's going to burn up, except for those treasures we build on the other side, as they would say. And so we invest in you. So, I mean, if listeners are you're pricked by this, or you want to know more information, we'll have some things in the show notes for you to check out more about what the Wrights are doing and their missions work. Is there anything that we can do to encourage you? Obviously help financially, but anything in any other arenas that folks listening could encourage you?
No, I think, I think it was just really encouraging to hear from you, the like 7 thing of like 7 times that someone's heard it, and just realizing, it is encouraging to just hear that. And like I said, that's how we keep from getting discouraged, is have people that call those things out in us. So, we send out a support letter occasionally, but, you can always reply to that email. So if anyone wants to join our newsletter, I can get your email and add it. But, you can always send us an email. We love to hear from people back home and know that they're praying for us. Know that, on the days where we feel like we're not making a difference, to hear from some other people and put that into God's perspective and see. That stuff's really encouraging. So we love to be to hear from people, to take people along on this journey with us. So that's one of the ways. If you want to join our newsletter, and as we put out needs and we put out what we're praying into and specific prayers for people, and you can write us back and let us know that you're praying for us or you're praying for that family. Those things like that go a long way. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely include all that in the show notes where people can get in contact with you. Is there anything else that we need to cover we haven't mentioned today that you would really like for our listeners to know about what you're doing, or anything we can be focused on as far as we pray for you?
Yeah, not much. I think just one of the things that I'm feeling is, it's great. Thanks for asking the questions about my past and my story. And, you're joking, but it is amazing to see what God's grace has done in my life. And just to say, like, if there's anyone out there that's listening and there's been an opportunity or something that sounds like that could never be me, that could, that's not who I am, I could never do that, to look into that and explore that. Because that's exactly what I thought the first time that God, opened this opportunity in Uganda. I'm like, that's not me. I'm this good old boy with this rough past that, that would never be me. And anyone who knows me, I have a brother who's very, very charismatic and very energetic. And that's him. He would do that, not me.
Yeah.
And I went through all that, and just the way that God opened that door. So if anyone's listening to this and there's something that's so far out of your comfort zone or so far out of who you think you are, and God's like knocking on that door, just to say, like, don't neglect that, because God can use anyone. And it's really amazing. I think so many people feel that call, but they're afraid to explore it. So to just say that.
Well, when I was a kid, I would not commit into full-time ministry because I thought I would have to be a missionary.
Yeah.
and I mean, literally, I'm like, I'm not, because God's going to send me around the world, and I don't want to do that. And I never will forget the day the Lord spoke to me and said, Dale, I don't want you to be a missionary. You'd be terrible at it, because I didn't create you to do that. So some of us have got callings to do church planting in our state, in our area, in our country, around the world. So it's all it's saying yes to who Jesus created you to be. And so who knows where this road's going to take you, but it's been fun to kind of see it come to fruition to where it is now. One of the things we always love to do when we wrap up our podcast is we love for our guests, and I want to ask you this question. So you've got hundreds of small and mid-sized church leaders that are listening right now. As you think about, what you do, but also specifically, a lot of churches, pastors are still struggling with the effect of the pandemic on their church. What's a word of encouragement or advice or hope or wisdom that you would, if you were sitting down having coffee with one of our pastors today, what would you share with them?
That's a great question. I think one of the things is, I think I just have a huge heart for pastors. I mean, my wife and I have a huge respect for I think just recognizing that, the weight that those guys carry, and so many people look into them, and just to realize that it's worth it. I know, I follow your page and see the statistics of how many pastors quit every year, and just realizing that Jesus gave his life for the bride, for the church, and as a pastor you get to do that every day. And so just to encourage you with the thing of, the weight that you're feeling, the struggles, the things that you're figuring out, the changes globally and the changes locally that are happening, just realizing that you have such an opportunity to every day to give your life for the thing that Jesus cared most about. And I know that the church around the world is, it's got flaws and it's got broken things, but at the end of the day, it's the bride of Christ, and he cares about nothing else more than that. And so just to say, as pastors, I hope that's encouraging. I know I don't have a lot of the answers, especially to the Western church and the changes and the things that they're going through, but I know God's heart, and I know that Jesus gave his life for the bride, and anyone who does the same, he's so pleased with you. He's going to make a way. So whatever weight you're carrying, just realize that you're getting to do that every day and follow in his footsteps. I hope that's really encouraging. Yeah.
Well said. Well said.
Yep.
Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and be on the podcast. And as I said earlier, I would love to see someone step up and provide the $3,600 you guys need for your language training. Also, you had mentioned that you'd love to put your child in daycare. One, to connect with the people you're trying to reach with, but two, to put your child in daycare, just to give you all a little bit of a break. So, if your church is missions minded and you have a heart and a passion that you want to step up, and again, I will vouch for this couple. You can ask me about them. I'm putting my stamp on them. So don't you go screw up, boy. I'm just kidding. And so I've got their back. And so, but if you feel led to, please use the contact information in the show notes to reach out. And again, you can just reach out to me if you don't know how to get in touch with them, and I will connect you. But thank you, man. I appreciate you. I love you. I appreciate what you're doing. I'm so proud of you and for what God's doing in your life. And you're truly I guess it's a terrible way to say it, but you're a trophy of the grace of God, man. I mean, you are just a great example of what the Jesus can do if somebody will just give them their all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Dale. Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.